Welcome back to Dr. Hollowed. Today, we will explore some of the scariest and most unexplainable phenomena experienced by people, from chilling paranormal encounters and bewildering glitches in the Matrix to eerie tales of black-eyed children and skinwalkers. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We have something at play in our house, multiple occasions where things have come off the shelves, sitting and reading a story with the kids and a book fell off their shelf in the far corner of the room. We hadn't been bouncing or anything, just sitting cuddled and reading. Visitors have thought they heard a kid in pajamas scuffling up to the table to look and see that nothing is there. I've dropped my keys after getting home, just me and taking a quick whiz with the bathroom door open, line of sight to the counter but back turned. I hear my keys fall again on the stone counter, a very distinct sound and nothing running that would jiggle them or, in any way, settle the keys more. My spouse has reported something grabbing her shirt, like a kid would, while she was cooking. Only to turn and see nothing. I have had the dog toys squeak by themselves sitting in the middle of the room, untouched as the dog has been gone for years. Strange shadows in the house sometimes. Our oldest used to tell us the shadows played with his little sister. He was just little, he would have seen anything like that on TV as he was under 5 and not in school yet either. The neighbor claimed to be in touch with spirits and told my spouse that our daughter's sleep problems were from the spirits wanting to play with her throughout the night and to ask them to wait until morning. I experienced several paranormal type occurrences that I can't explain to this day. Multiple sightings of ghosts or whatever you'd call them at my old house in Maryland. When we toured the house, I saw what looked like a figure walk through a wall. I also vividly remember seeing a pair of feet walking across my bedroom floor one night. Anything that happened in that house wasn't too scary, but definitely a little unnerving. Once, while staying at my great-grandmother's house, I was taking a nap and woke up to the blanket I was using hovering above my feet and slowly being pulled off of me. Nobody else was in the room or house, and I freaked the fuck out. The scariest was probably when I overdosed in high school. I remember lying on the bathroom floor, and a man, who at the time I thought was my dad, was just kind of there. He didn't say anything, but he was there while I was in and out of consciousness. It was honestly really comforting at the time. I don't know how I survived that odd, and when I finally came to the hospital, I was confused as to why my dad didn't take me to the hospital or even mention it. I never brought it up until years later, when I found out my dad didn't even know I had overdosed. I don't know what or who that was, and while having him there was comforting, it's scary not having an answer to what the fuck happened. It may not quite fit the bill, but I was in the Highlands about 3 years ago for a friend's wedding. Me and my friend, Ashley, were driving through a fairly remote and off the beaten track kind of area. Against my better judgment, both of us were a fair few units over the limit at 11 at night on icy roads, and he had just fitted a fat supercharged V8 into his baby blue Ford F100. So I was there, watching the needle of the speed dial go past its own limit, when suddenly I saw these faint lights in the sky. They quickly disappeared, so we thought nothing of it. Then they appeared again, slightly closer than last time. They were in a strange pattern, unlike any vehicle or plane we had ever seen, and while we were wondering what the fuck this thing was, it disappeared again. By now, we were a little on edge but still thought it must be some kind of building or something, and so this happened a couple more times until we began to be able to hear this thing. I can't really describe the initial sound in a way that does it justice. It was like a heavily distorted scream or roar, and as we came closer to it, we began to be able to hear chanting voices, and at this point I was preparing to be vaporized by a UFO or some shit, until we rose above the brow of the hill and we were met by the blinding floodlights of a trailer, with an inflatable Santa on top, blaring Christmas carols through massive speakers positioned either side of him. We soon figured out that the rolling landscape had made this thing look like it was floating, when it was only disappearing over the top of a hill. My favorite experience was when I was helping my ex-girlfriend's aunt move into a new apartment. Both of them had no knowledge of the history of the apartment, so she has an autistic son who's 5 to 7 years old. That's very lovely overall, and while we're finally done unpacking, he's freaking out. He rarely talks and doesn't speak clearly, yet he says it clearly. As a California day, he says he sees a weird man with a disfigured neck move around the living room where my ex, her aunt, the kid, and I are all sleeping for the night. I tried to comfort him, tell him not to be afraid, and tell him to tell the man to go away, he's not welcome here. I made him shout it out a few times, and he eventually settled down after some rest. The mom, aunt, is all freaking out and doesn't know what to do. I told her not to worry and just ignore it, don't be scared. The next day, the aunt asked some neighbors what she experienced. It turns out she found out a guy hanged himself in one of the apartment's second-story units above hers. The biggest chills went down my arms, thinking what a coincidence. all unfolds in front of me. This happened when I was about 5 years old. I know it can probably be dismissed as a dream, or nightmare, for some, but it felt damn real to me. We lived in a one-bedroom house when I was growing up. I didn't even have a bed at the time, just a mattress on the floor. I was along one edge of the wall, with my feet pointed towards a closet door at the corner of the room. The entry door was on the wall opposite my bed. I found myself standing along the wall with the entry door one night. I don't remember how I got there, I was just suddenly there. When I looked at my bed, I could see myself laying face up on the bed. I don't recall thinking it was odd or anything. I just kind of accepted that I was seeing myself sleeping. I then saw a panther materialize from the closet, as if it had just leapt out of a portal on the door and flowed towards me lying on the mattress. Instead of landing on me, it slowly disappeared into me. When the tail completely disappeared, I woke up back in my bed and shot up into a seating position, crying or yelling. I remember seeing my mom already by my side when I actually woke up. She had already been there just before I woke. When I asked her about it some years later, she didn't really remember if I talked about what I saw then. She did recall a few nightmares that I woke up from, but no details. I had almost forgotten about this one for years, but recalled it when I happened to do some reading on out-of-body experiences. I believe that's what this was. I was in an old town in Nova Scotia with my best friend, who was visiting her family. We had gone out just us two to explore the beaches and ended up in a deserted part where we sat talking for hours. Out of thin air, a man appears within feet of us and says, "You are not from around here." We both heard and saw him, then we blinked, and he was gone. Literally nowhere to be found. We got so creeped out that we started sprinting to our car to get out of there, thinking he had hidden and was planning on doing something bad to us. We get to the car and start driving back home along a long, windy road, about 30 minutes from the beach. Out of thin air, again, a car is behind us riding our ass, and I look at the driver, and it's the man again. I scream and start crying, and my friend sees him too. The road took a wind, and the car never came around the bend. It disappeared into thin air again. We both saw him twice. We still can't make sense of it to this day. I bought a home in 2018 and started having nightmares. I woke up one night, and the room seemed foggy, not smoky, and I felt my ex-husband holding my feet and standing at the end of my bed. We were divorced but still living together at that point. I suddenly lost my mind because I assumed he hadn't made it home and came to say goodbye. I flipped out, woke the kids up, and was crying when he walked in. I got a carbon monoxide detector the next day. I kept having these gnarly, shining nightmares. Lots and lots of blood. My kid said he'd talk to the ghosts in the house, and after he did, I never had a scary dream again. Every single owner before me, 6 owners, died within 2 years of buying my home. I'm in year 4 now, thankfully. COVID popping up a few years ago felt like holy SHT, this may actually come true. All those owners made lots of dumb fixes that I'm slowly but surely repairing. At this point, I'm feeling like the house ghosts are thanking me and bringing me good luck. I also had a dream. I was awake when death walked in and said if I kept drinking, I was going to die. I stopped drinking, and I went to AA the next day. I also had a dream that my insane, headbanging, house-destroying toddler needed a specific Chinese herbal formula for diabetes. It took a while for me to get it because it seemed so crazy, but after a few months, I gave it to him out of desperation. He never banged his head again. He started crawling at 5 months old, and my theory is that his blood sugar wasn't stable because he was so thin. I'd read in a study that thinner babies are more likely to get diabetes, so maybe that's what put it in my brain. Nothing crazy, but that's what I've got. A few months ago, I was at home with my fiancée. Our kids were sleeping, and it was around 11 p.m. We have a door that leads from our kitchen to the garage, and the door has a deadbolt that is kind of sticky and requires a bit of force to get it to actually turn. I was standing in the kitchen, and she went out to the garage to get a drink. We typically just let the door close on its own behind us, because as long as it isn't let go from too far away, it closes quietly on its own. She went out the door and down the 3 stairs that lead down to the garage, and the door began to close behind her. As the door was closing, I heard 3 fast footsteps that sounded like her running back up the steps, and the door hit the frame and made a loud thud. When I went to check on her, the deadbolt was turned, so the door couldn't close. So somehow, the deadbolt got turned to the locked position from the inside as the door was closing, at the same time that I heard the footsteps. I asked if she heard the steps, and she said that she thought it was me playing a joke on her. I occasionally pretend to lock her out when she goes into the garage, and was just as freaked out as I was when she realized I was on the opposite side of the kitchen, nowhere near the door where we both heard the steps. Still hands down the most convincing paranormal experience I've ever had, and the only one I don't question its legitimacy. I got a few that stand out. A while back, my husband and I went on a double date with some friends, and they brought their dog. When I went to greet them, the place we were at was a hole in the wall. I saw their dog and had the distinct feeling that she was wrong. She's a lab/pit mix. Thick, short, sturdy, blocky head. This dog looked similar but gave off the impression of being very tall and thin, almost like a collie. Longer snout, thin face. Definitely not their dog. I shrugged it off. When we got into the car to leave, the second the doors shut, my husband went, "That wasn't Zoe, was it?" I admit I can be taken on flights of fancy, but my husband is rock solid. If he can't see it, feel it, or hear it, he does not accept it. That freaked me out more than her being wrong. I agreed and asked what she normally looked like, and he remembered the same thing. She was normal the next time we saw her. The house I grew up in had a few weird things. I saw a light in the sky that would vanish whenever I told someone it was there. It always traveled in a circle, where it was white on the top half and changed to red on the bottom half. Even though the house was modular and the bottom of my bedroom window was 6 feet off the ground outside, I was regularly woken up during the night by bright lights in my face. Rural, so no street lights for miles. Once we lost power, our radio turned on. Parents took out the batteries, unplugged them, and it kept going until the power turned back on. I've had many odd experiences when I was younger that were never really substantiated and often left me wondering if I imagined them. However, I recently shared an experience with several witnesses that was even published in national news. I was gathered around a campfire with my wife and her parents. We were on the last day of a summer vacation trip up in a very remote area in North America, and one thing we enjoyed together late at night was watching the stars and planets. Lots of light pollution in the city meant this was a big deal for us on these trips. We would catch the occasional satellite or, if we were very lucky, a shooting star. It was late, and we were just waiting for one of us to call it a night when some faint motion caught my eye. Over the tree line, a glittering little satellite started out over the sky, and I pointed up and called it out. You can always tell a satellite from a plane because they move much faster, and they don't blink or make noise like most aircraft do. What was unusual is that as soon as this first object appeared, another appeared right behind it, matching its speed and brightness. Then another appeared and another until it was clear I was watching a parade of literally dozens of lights gliding across the sky in a perfectly straight line. I remember the startling and heavy feeling when my father-in-law broke the silence. He just muttered something like, "No fucking way, is that real?" Everyone else looked up to see what I was seeing. It didn't go away or change course. In a few moments, the lights almost stretched all the way across the sky. I felt like I was rooted to the spot, helpless. My brain struggled to rationalize what we were seeing while this parade advanced rapidly and silently across the sky. We were all frozen, panicking, watching until the objects disappeared across the other horizon. Then we all sat in silence for a moment before checking to see if we had all seen the same thing. At that point, it was apparent that something really unusual had just happened, and I couldn't shake the impression that we'd just seen an outer space convoy of some kind just passing through the celestial neighborhood. I was really thinking about the possibility of first contact with another civilization. And if it wasn't aliens, did we just see a row of bulbs get replaced in the giant dome over flat Earth? We sat out for a while discussing what had happened, but eventually there was nothing else. We were out of cell phone range that night and the next morning, so checking the news was impossible for a while. Breakfast with the family still held that feeling that we were witnessing something truly extraordinary. Eventually, we found the stories of the SpaceX Starlink satellite launch that had passed over us that night. On one hand, it was a relief that confirmed the unknown, but it took a while to shake that feeling we shared of being totally in awe and witnessing something so plainly absurd and supernatural. Definitely one of my biggest glitch in the Matrix moments. Not my own story, but it's from my dad. They used to work across the country with him, my grandfather, and another relative in construction. I guess somewhere along the line, they stopped at a hotel or bed and breakfast type thing that was run by a strange older woman. Dad said she wore robes and leotards. I guess it was the 80s, so it fits? He said she was just really weird about things and poking around the hotel too much. She mainly, this is what got them wondering, told them not to wander the halls at night as it's dangerous. Go inside, lock the door, and try not to leave till morning. So Dad said later that night, close to bedtime, it sounded like she was stomping up and down the halls, dragging her nails on the walls and doors. Then he said the door thumped, and it was like a crazy pressure built up on the door like it was going to implode. Then it dropped off and all went quiet. They basically sat up all night, packed their shit, and left ASAP the next day. My grandfather was convinced she was some form of nasty witch practicing black magic or something, but Dad said regardless, it was pretty freaky. One morning, right after Halloween this past year, I found a smashed egg on the floor of my garage. The garage is ridiculous, with 4 giant bays and a full, unfinished second floor. It's just a plywood platform with no walls. The bay furthest from my house is where I built winter coops for my chickens, and so you might say, well, no shit, there was an egg, you've got birds right there. Except this was not one of my chickens' eggs. It was a big, white egg, just like you'd buy at Walmart, but my birds only lay little brown eggs. This was also November in Maine, so there's no way it was from any kind of wild bird. It was also outside their coops, smashed on the floor by the far wall of the garage. There's no way for my birds' eggs to get out of the coop without someone unlatching the door, going in, and opening the nesting boxes, which are also latched. And there was absolutely no sign of anyone or anything having gotten into the garage the night before. The windows and the back door are alarmed, and the back door is also where my dogs, a Doberman mix and a pit mix who are both unfriendly to strangers and other animals, have their door out to their potty yard. Anything coming into that yard and through that door would be taking its life in its hands. There was nothing else disturbed, moved, or missing. The chickens were all fine and happy, not acting spooked at all. So where the fuck did this egg come from? It had been well below freezing the night before, even in the garage, but the white of the egg hadn't completely frozen, so it couldn't have happened too long before I came out to feed the birds. As I was standing there staring at it like an idiot, it also dawned on me that where it was lying on the floor was exactly where it would have landed if it had fallen or been dropped off the edge of the attic floor. So the dogs, the shotgun, and I went up to check out the attic. I only use it for storage, and I had been up there just a couple days before putting away Halloween decorations, and absolutely nothing looked different. No footprints were left in the dust besides mine. Nothing moved. No carton of eggs from Walmart is sitting at the edge of the floor. So I don't know. I guess there's a teleporting egg glitch in the Matrix. I had 2 other incidents of things in my house moving around inexplicably around the same time, and if I were a believer in ghosts, I would genuinely think something was fucking with me. It felt mischievous. About 4 years ago, I was having extremely bad sleep paralysis episodes. My mental health was in a very bad state, and I was teetering on killing myself pretty often during that time, not getting enough sleep, and having it pretty rough at home. A lot of them were weird, but there was one that freaked me to my core and never happened again. Picture a rectangle, hamburger style. My bed is in the bottom right corner of my room, with my head against the bottom face and my right hand side against the right face. My closet door is at the end of my bed, in the top right corner, on my right hand side. Basically, if you walk out of the closet and turn left, there's my bed. Now, my dumb younger self had been messing around with witchcraft and was filled with a lot of angry, hateful, and vindictive energy. I held very strong grudges and enacted karma spells and other things on the people who were hurting me, and this opened up the door to some really weird hallucinations. I'd had sleep paralysis before, but nothing this vivid. I was lying in bed on my back, and a faint white light was coming from the left-hand side of the room from my nightlight. It was completely dark otherwise. I saw my closet door open, and something walked out of it. It was a black goat on 2 legs, in a black suit. It wasn't any taller than 5'10". The horns were a dark gray or black and were similar to a juvenile Gurgentana goat's horns. Dark red eyes. It had that white puffy fabric coming out of the chest area, think 19th century style. It had a brooch that was a red gem with a black head around it, with pink fabric sticking out of the sides. This brooch was on his collar in place of a tie. The suit had dark red buttons, and it had black gloves on with human hands. Complete human stature. But I can't remember the details past that. This thing walks out of my closet and past my bed, into the middle of the room. It flicks its hand and flings me out of my bed, to the left, and onto the floor. I felt the itchy carpet on my back as I stared up at it. I slowly rose upward until I was floating about 3.5 feet up in the air. The thing walked up to my left-hand side and shoved its gloved, human hand into my gut, right above my belly button. The arm went all the way down to the elbow joint, and when it pulled its arm back out, the other half was gone. The missing part of the arm started fading back into place as I ragdolled back onto the floor, and the thing walked back into the closet. My vision faded out and came back in again, and I was back in bed with my closet door still open. I woke up the next morning extremely disturbed. Beyond freaked out. I consulted all my religious friends for help and drew a cross on my stomach for weeks after. It felt like there was a lead ball in my gut for almost a month and a half after the occurrence. I never saw or felt that thing again, but the story freaks people out to this day. I have a couple of stories. I don't really believe in ghosts or anything else, but I've had some interesting experiences. 1. I was out to dinner with my mom and her husband. We were at this place called the Gaslight Inn. They had some bombast breaded tenderloin sandwiches. The place was known to be haunted and a place where Dillinger hung out and was a speakeasy during Prohibition. They would have tours of the basement, where there were sightings. We were there with a couple other customers. Pretty slow night. I had to go pee, so I got up and headed to the back of the building to the larger dining area, where the restrooms were. It was really slow, so all the tables and chairs were stacked off to the side. A gentleman seated with his wife near us also got up and headed towards the restroom. He seemed to be a bit inebriated. I go in, do my business, and as I'm washing my hands, the bathroom door handle jiggles like someone's trying to come in. It's a single-serve bathroom, and I hate when people do that. Once I can understand, but when do they keep trying? I call out, "I'm in here." Then, right as I'm drying my hands, the handle jiggles again, and by now I'm really annoyed that this drunk fella keeps trying to open the door. As the damn handle is still jiggling, I grab it and swing the door open, expecting to see him standing there, but nobody was there. The drunk guy was about 25 feet across the room, looking around and waiting on me. 2. I was at an IGA grocery store later in the evening, probably around 9:30 p.m. I was pretty much alone, aside from the cashier. It was in a small town where I lived at the time, and the store was in an old strip mall. It looked to be from around the 1960s. I was walking around the store trying to find what I needed when I rounded the corner to the bread aisle. I saw a loaf of bread on the top rack come straight up, then forward and onto the ground. The bread was definitely on the ground. I didn't hallucinate it. I told the cashier, and she looked creeped out and like she was slightly annoyed that she had to finish her shift with this new information. 3. I was at my ex-wife's parents' house with a few of her family members. We were all sitting around the dining room table, talking. I had a glass of soda, no ice, and it slid across the table in front of everyone. My first thought was condensation against the glass table. I picked up my glass, and it was dry on the bottom, and the table was dry. I tried to move it myself, like it had just moved, and there was enough friction there to rule out something like condensation. They all saw what happened and had the attitude, "Yeah, it's the ghost." Stuff like this happens all the time. Same house on the 4th of July. The family was outside to watch me light off fireworks, and I had to use the restroom first, so I ran inside. The bathroom was in the living area that used to be the garage, and the floor was recessed lower than the rest of the house. The bathroom also contained the laundry area. The living room was dark, but the light in the bathroom was on, so I just went in, did my business, and as I was coming out, I could hear what sounded like a toddler, kind of like how toddlers breathe heavy and make little baby noises, and got the impression somehow that it was a girl. The sound was coming from the entire dark living area, but it sounded damped, like how your voice sounds if you're in a closet full of clothes, and it also sounded in my head, like I had headphones on. It was fucking strange. I got the hell out of there quickly. One time, on a class trip into a very, very old building, we all swore the place had to be haunted. It even had a well in the basement, and we kept joking that something lived in it. The big hallway on the top floor creeped everyone out. It had a little sitting space with 2 armchairs and a coffee table, but nobody wanted to approach it because it was in the corner without light at the very end of the hallway and just felt off. It wasn't anyone's right to sit there. One day, while telling ghost stories, I decided to take the good old movie approach and take pictures of the rooms with my shitty flip phone. When I took a picture in the room where me and my friends were staying, I saw a very clear orb. That creeped me out, but yeah, those are probably dust particles, though it was weird to get one big orb in that house of all places. So I went into the creepy hallway, pointed my phone at the corner with the coffee table, pressed the photo button, and the phone died. Completely shut off. That hadn't happened before and didn't happen after. It took me several minutes to start it back up. When it did, I tried to take another picture of the corner, but nothing. I took a perfectly normal picture, not even a floater to be seen. It's probably the creepiest experience I've had, but it could just be a coincidence. What I can't explain is a different story. I was hanging out with my friend at his place, playing games in his room, when we both clearly heard his mom call for him. We paused the game, got up, and went to the kitchen, where we thought she was. She wasn't there. So we continued looking around but failed to find her in the house. In the end, we went outside, and there she was, in the garden, pulling out weeds. "There you are, Mom. What did you call us for?" I didn't call you. I've been out here the entire time." My neighbor had been hassling me to go to this local business improvement district meeting every few months, and since he promised it would be catered to by all the local restaurants, I eventually agreed. As we are walking, I'm checking out the agenda, and it has my own fucking name listed as the vice president. The census records of my country only have a few thousand people ever having my last name since its inception, and I've never met one I wasn't related to. So we get there and am introduced to people. They all seem to be familiar with me and know me. I'm playing it as cool as I can, trying to understand what is happening. Did I take some drugs? Have I just gone crazy? Did I slide into an alternate dimension? We are sitting as people give speeches and updates, and while I start to panic, we are getting closer and closer to the VP's segment with absolutely no idea what to do. I can usually bluff my way through stuff, but I don't even have a thread to pull. I accept that I can't keep playing it cool, hoping this will start to make sense, and I confess that I have absolutely no idea what's happening. It turns out my neighbor apparently signed me up to serve on the bid with himself as the alternate, hoping I would eventually do the work. If he ever mentioned it, I don't remember, and he definitely never mentioned it twice while he did all the work for about a year. I wish I could tell the story better, but it's very strange because I couldn't understand what was happening and my brain couldn't figure out how to record it in memory. Even the next day, I struggled and failed to explain what happened. I'm pretty sure I discussed it in a Reddit comment soon after, and it would be interesting to see how the recollection has shifted. It's really a challenge to explain it as a series of events that make sense. I still have the meeting agenda with my name on it somewhere. When I was younger, about 7 years old, we took a rural road home. It was a single-track road with a couple farmhouses, and almost Sleepy Hollow-esque with the trees causing archways over the road. My granddad was driving, and my brother and Nana were in the car as well. He came to a stop in the road. There was this huge, massive black cat, almost like a panther. I live in northeast Scotland. It stopped in the middle of the road, stared straight into my soul, and then jumped a fence into the field. I never saw the cat again. I've tried multiple times to see it, and I drive that road daily now to try. I'm 32 now. My grandparents were the only ones that remembered it besides myself, but they both unfortunately passed away a few years ago. My younger brother has no memory, and no one else believes me that I saw it. Since this incident, I have found various news articles relating to people releasing big cats into the wild and a panther-style cat being spotted 5 or 6 miles away from my house. Unfortunately, there haven't seemed to be any sightings since 2013. When I was very young, close to 4 years old, my parents had a friend. She babysat me. She was basically a surrogate aunt. I absolutely adored her, and since she couldn't have kids, she spent as much time with me as she could and spoiled me rotten. Her name was Stacy. I don't recall any of this myself, but I'm told that one night I went into my parents' room and woke them up. I told them that Stacy came to visit me in my room and that she had a pretty red ribbon around her neck, and that she said to tell everyone that she's okay, and then she left. I used to have vivid dreams a lot as a kid, so they thought nothing of it. The next morning, Stacy's husband called. During the night, he had been in an accident. Stacy hadn't been wearing her seat belt. It was the early 90s, and this was still fairly normal at the time. Stacy was thrown through the windshield and decapitated in the accident. My parents didn't tell me for nearly a year, which I do remember, because it was devastating when I learned that she hadn't just been on vacation. I'm a huge skeptic. I believe there is nothing paranormal. So when my mom told me about what I'd said that night, I thought she was pulling my leg, although logically, I knew she'd never make something up about one of the most upsetting events in my childhood. At that point, my parents had been divorced, so I called my dad out of the blue and asked him about it. He's also a no-nonsense, explain everything guy. He went dead silent on the phone, then told me it was true, that it's one of the scariest memories he has, and that he never wants to talk about what I said again. So there's that. I'm not sure what to make of it. I haven't had any experiences like this since. In high school, my girlfriend lived in a semi-new development. Before it had McMansions everywhere, it was dense wood. Well, one day after school, we were having a snack in the kitchen when she left to go retrieve something from upstairs. Her house was set up as follows: the front door leads directly to the stairs, and past them is the kitchen, while there is a living room and an office room to the left and right. As she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she bolts it back to me, where I am sitting on the kitchen table. I asked her what's wrong, and she said she was an old man sitting in the chair in the living room. He was a man in a suit with a long white beard. I laugh it off and tell her there's nothing there. Some months later, as I was walking to her kitchen, I saw a man sitting at the head of the table in the dining room, which is right behind the living room and connects to the kitchen behind the stairs. I let her know I saw something, but I excused it since the seed of the idea had already been planted. A few weeks later, she has a friend visiting from Brazil, where my girlfriend was from as well. My girlfriend and I are in her room being teenagers when her friend comes bursting through the door like the Kool-Aid Man in full tears with her headphones around her neck. Her friend doesn't speak much English, and in Portuguese, she tells my girlfriend that while she was listening to music downstairs, she bumped into a tall old man with a long white beard. To this day, there is no way she was making it up or had any prior knowledge of our encounter. My girlfriend wasn't one to be a believer, and I didn't have much to say to her friend as there was a major language barrier. To this day, I really want to drop off a letter to that house to see if the current residents have seen the old man with a white beard.